Hi guys, this is Mike Hibbert back with another Python Django tutorial for you. This week we're going to cover the subject of messages and how to send messages to your users to give them confirmations of success or failure or different actions that have been performed through a website. Now, you may be familiar with the concept of flash messages, which are used in pretty much all web frameworks. They basically are a way of storing a small message or a string message in the system and displaying it on the next page along, and it basically is a one-time only kind of storage. So what happens is you put a message in there and then it displays on the next page along, but on the page after that message no longer is stored in the system. And that's why it's called a flash message, because it's a one-off type of message that you can pass from page to page. Now, most frameworks have this in, and Django has it in also. So it's basically under the Django contrib section called messages, and we're going to basically go through and see how that works so that we can provide some feedback. Now, we've been doing the articles app throughout the series, so I'm going to basically extend that a little bit further and make it a bit more user friendly, and just basically show you how you can incorporate messaging into your websites. So the first thing we need to do is we just need to add a few settings to our settings.py file. Now the first thing I'm going to add is an alternative definition for a message. I'm going to create a delete message. Now, the messaging system has everything from a success message or a failure message or an info message, but it doesn't have a delete message. And I want to have something that's distinct so that I can identify when something was deleted in the system. Now, that'll become more obvious as we get towards the end of the video why I'm doing that, but I'll just bear with us whilst I explain this. So delete message is going to be equal to 50, and the reason for that is because the messaging system uses a series of numbers to identify which type of message it is. So for instance, debug is equal to 40, and debug being the last message that comes as the default set of message types, we basically can add in an extra message identifier of 50 after that. So I've added that extra, and then I'm going to define a message tags setup, and what I'm going to say is delete message equals deleted. Now what the message tags do is that when you output your messages, you use the message tags to then define a class in your HTML, so that you can then use CSS to actually identify this within the HTML and give it some special formatting so that we can basically highlight it. And in the case of our CSS, I'm going to say that if I just move down to our bottom there, the deleted class for CSS will have a background of a dark reddish color, a border color of even darker red, and then some pattern inside of there. I'm also going to define some CSS for the success messages, which already come by default with the messaging system, so we don't have to define those. They're already built into the system anyway. We're doing a custom one here because I want to show you how that you can add and extend your messaging system. So with the success one, we've got the background color is a green, and the border color is a darker green, and some more pattern inside. So basically this deleted one's going to be showing up red, the success one's going to be showing up green. So basic traffic light system kind of idea. So we create this message tags section here so that we can define this extra deleted message tag, so that later on when we use the messages system, it'll include that, and then we will then have automatically selecting HTML styling for each message. Okay, right, so moving on, we now have to start using something called the template context processors. Now previously we haven't defined these, we haven't bothered to use them so far, but now that we're using messages, we need to take advantage of the context processors for messages. Now what that means is that when we pass a message into the system, the context processor will then store that message for the next page along, and then make sure that it turns up in a variable called messages that can be used in your views. So I'll show you that in a moment, but basically all you'll need to do is make sure that you include this line, and if you're using authentication you may well get an error and it'll say you need to include that, so just basically include it in. You might get an error to say you need the context processors for requests, and if you need to do that you can just add it in. You should get all of that in the actual the error pages when you actually try to view the web page. So it's important to read the tracebacks on errors and look at the feedback that it's given you, and then include whatever it needs so that it can actually execute. In the case of this, I think you'll probably find that the only thing it'll ask you to do is make sure that auth context processors are in there, and also your context processors for messages. Now, we also need to look into our installed apps. Now, I've commented out these two here, or rather this one here, because in some people's setup you might not have that. We do need this included though, so we need to include in the installed apps django.contrib.messages. Okay, and that will allow us to use the framework for the messaging system. The next thing we also need to do is we need to look at our middleware classes and make sure that Django contrib messages middleware message middleware is included, and that's the stuff that actually just organizes the messages and gets them put into the right place for us to use them in our views. Okay, so that's our setups done. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a new view available, and it's basically going to be a view that will let us delete a comment. So we need to add a root to that, and I'm going to add a delete comment with the comment ID on the end, and I'm going to route it through to article views delete comment, which we haven't written yet. So let's go and have a look at that. Now, over in the views file, this is the views file for our article app, we're going to add two imports. The first being, we want Django.template import request context. Now the reason for that is because we need to use this particular kind of context in contrast to the kind that we used before, because you notice when we use render response we don't really pass anything in other than the arguments and the template name. Now if you're going to start using things like messages, you need to start using something different from what the default context is. Now the default context here for render to response is just a basic context object. We need to be able to recognize that there are things being passed from one page to another, and the context that's capable of doing that can parcel up those pieces of information that are being passed from one page to another is the request context. So this basically allows us to then start passing information like messages from one page to another. Now you could write your own system using the session or the cookies or whatever to make your own messages up, but this is much simpler and is already comes for free inside of the framework. So The next thing we want is from Django.contrib import the messages module, and that will help us to then actually put messages into the system. Okay, so down next to our create function, which is creating an article, I'm going to actually add in a delete method. Now we've got our add comment method here, which does a few bits of basically fetching information and adding in the comments and associating it with the article. But we want to be able to have a handler that actually does the deleting. So the first thing we do is just define the name of the function, which we set up on our URLs as delete comment. So we're going to match that through, and it's going to have an argument of request, obviously because it's a view, but then comment ID. The first thing we want to do is just basically fetch that comment. So from the comments objects get an object that matches the ID of comment ID. We'll bring that back out. The next thing we want to do is we want to record the article ID that this comment is associated with. And the reason for that is because once we've deleted this comment, we're going to pass back through to the comment, or sorry, not the comment, the article page where we saw the comment and we pressed the delete button. That'll become more obvious later also. The next step is just to simply delete the comment. Then we're going to add our first message. Now we're going to use our custom message identifier. So we're going to use messages add message with a copy of the request to attach to the HTTP request, so that when it passes through, it actually passes through this message too. So from our settings module, we're going to use the delete message, and that's the one we defined just here in our settings.py, literally using that as the identifier for the type of message that this message is. So we're adding a message and saying it's a type delete message, and then we just add in a string saying your comment was deleted, and that'll be enough to store a message in the system, so that when we forward back to our article page where we press the delete button, we should see that the message was deleted, but we should also then see a message at the top saying, hang on, did I just say that twice? Yeah, we should see that the message is deleted on the page. So we'll not see it on the list anymore, but we'll also see a message that confirms that it was deleted. That's better, that makes more sense. Okay, so finally we do an HTTP response redirect through to the article's get URL with the article ID that we pulled out just here, and that should then push us back to the article page where we saw the delete button and clicked it. So that's the handler for that. Now we've got on our create page a place where we save the article. Now we can add in a message here which is of messages type success, and then basically add in a string to say your article was added. Now notice what we're doing here, we're identifying the type of message in the system. So when we come to actually render the page, the type will be then put into the class of the HTML, and then that should then also associate it with the CSS automatically for us. So because we've said this is of type success, it should show up in green on the page, whereas on our delete one it should show up as red. Okay, now if I just move down to where we created our comment, because that's where we've created an article, and we want a confirmation to say your article was created, but we also want a section that says add a comment and your comment was created. Now messages gives you a little shorthand way of doing this. Instead of having to use add add message like we did here, we can use a shorthand one if it's just a success message. And there are a couple of other shorthand ones like debug and info that basically assume the type of message, so you don't have to show pass in things like delete message or success or whatever. In the case of our delete, because it's a custom message, we do have to do that. We do have to actually use the add message method. But in the case of a success, because this is part of the default set of message types, we can use this shortcut which simplifies it for us, and basically just pass it in a string that says your comment was added. Okay, now that's our views setup. The HTML side of things needs adjusting also, and the first thing we're going to adjust is our base HTML, so the template that we based the whole website on. So this is the thing that gives us the whole layout of this page, so the left bar and the center content area. And we're going to add in the messages so that they'll display right at the top of the page here. So to do that, we go into the base template, and above where it says block content, which we've reserved for content only, we're going to add in some code. And the code is first of all to check if there are any messages. Okay, so if there are any messages, then we will then insert a UL tag with the class messages, which just basically equates to an area with a dark background and some white text, so that should contrast nicely with the green and red areas. Then we do a for loop through all of the messages that are available, so you can basically put more than one in. Although we haven't done that, we could stick several messages in there. We could stick a debug message if we wanted to do that. And then we're gonna, for every message there is in the system, we're gonna add in a li tag, and we're gonna test within there if there are any message tags associated with that, which there should be in our case. Then the class equals what the message tags are. So that's where we defined our message tags in the settings.py. So we defined deleted here, so that when a deleted message type appears in the messages list, the message tags should contain the word deleted, and then that's how we're setting our class in our CSS. And then finally we're just doing end if, and then after that we actually just insert what the message is. So that's basically how we've inserted our messages into the page. One last thing that I wanted to point out is, if I just try and find it, is that on our article page, you see I've commented out the code that we used to use. Now this is because there is a number of ways of doing the rendering of the HTML. Now, do you remember I mentioned we had to have a request context? Now, if I just come out these two lines out and go back and do this, we need to pass in a context instance of type request contexts, so that the messaging system will process the messages through the HTTP requests properly. The default context, which would be normally that, isn't good enough, so we need the request context, as I said earlier. Now that's basically made our lines of code a bit more complex. However, if instead we import render in instead of render to response, render actually uses a request context object by default. So we can actually simplify our code even more. If I just comment that out again and then uncomment that, we actually reduce these 3 lines of code to 2 lines of code and make it a bit more simple for ourselves by using render instead of render to response. 1 line of code difference, but to be fair, it's more readable, and also you don't necessarily have to worry yourself about making sure that you import this on your own. But for the reasons of you being able to understand that this is a necessary step in the process, that's why I've included that, so that you can see that that is required. It is different from the normal kind of render to response context that you would use. Okay, I think we're good to go on that one. So let's just start up the server and hopefully things won't break. And if I've managed to not miss anything, then that should be fine. So let's go to articles and create an article, my messages test, blah blah blah. Okay, date published is clearly wrong. Goodness knows. Here's a blatant plug for my new game La Vida. Okay, did that work? No, it didn't. Why not? I'll tell you what, rather than fix that, I'll just demonstrate it. There you go. So the article was added. At least our messaging's working anyway. Right, so we've got a comment that we can add in here. I'll just put my name in there a bit more, and then we're going to post a comment, and theoretically what should happen is that the message should then be put into the queue and then displayed at the top of the page. So there you go, comment was added. Now we mentioned that we've created a view that actually handles deleting, but we haven't actually put the link in so that we can delete it. So under our articles template, I'm going to quickly add in a link, and that's just basically passing through articles delete comment with the ID of the comment that we're using in here with the word delete. We don't need to do a refresh or restart the server to get that to work. We just need to add it. So then, as you can see, that basically forms a good enough URL for us to pass that through, and what should happen is that it'll go through to our view, and if I just scroll down, it'll go to delete comment, fetch the comment out, preserve the article ID for our redirection, delete the comment, and then put a message in there under our custom message type of delete message, which then should then style the message on return to the correct style. And then finally we redirect back to the article that we've just pressed the delete on, so back to this page. And there you go. So automatic style and selection, and a nice little feedback for your users so that they know that the process that they've tried to trigger on the website is successful. Okay, well that completes this tutorial for this week. Before I go, I'd like to just call your attention to my Kickstarter. I'm basically in the process of developing a computer game which has nothing to do with Django, but I'd like to make you aware of it because we'd really like it if you could help us out. Now, we've just literally started yesterday, so there aren't many people that have actually backed us so far, but if you would please do us the favour of even just sharing the message around on your Facebook or Twitter or your blogs, and let everyone know about this awesome project. You can visit our Kickstarter and see the video and it'll explain everything about the project, and hopefully you might feel inspired to help us out. Okay, right, well that's the end of our tutorial, and thanks for watching. If you learned something from this tutorial, then please click the like button, and if you want to know more about the tutorials in the series, including other tutorials that I'm going to be doing in my Ruby on Rails series, then please click the subscribe button and we'll send you a message as soon as that's available. Thanks for watching.